Les comento. Ah, este coche lo estamos rifando porque, como saben, HP tiene un patrocinio ahora con Ferrari y para nosotros la verdad es que es un orgullo y pues también es una forma de que ustedes vean que HP pues es colaborativo. Entonces, bueno, el carrito va a la mano santa. ¿Que el tercer boleto está bien? ¿O no? ¿El primero? ¿El primero? Ok, va. Ay, se me... A ver. Jenny, Becerral, Becerril. Nadie vaya al baño, por favor. Sí.
La playera.
Esta, por favor, díganme quién es fan del Real Madrid. Para saber que le toque el boleto a los fans del Real Madrid. Ven. Listo, entonces va el segundo boletito y de verdad espero que le toque a alguien que es fan del. Listo, es Anaí Negrete. Gracias. Gracias. Listo, y tenemos un último regalo, es una backpack para que vengan bien preparados a la escuela. Listo, es Ticia Centeno. Ah, perdón. Juan Luis, no, es Juan L. San, Sandías, ¿no? Juan C. Sí. Y gracias. Y por parte de la universidad vamos a rifar una lonchera y este va para Citlali Torres. ¡Ah, bravo! Ay, no. Y la chamarra va para José Julio Allende Hernández. ¡Bravo! Y la taza volando para Jorge Miranda A. Modo. Ya, el último. Mariana Martínez. ¿No? ¿Nadie? Híjole. Ah, ya, sí, Mariana Martínez. No es Mariana. Federico Mijangos. ¿No está? Raúl de la Torre Sánchez. ¡Bravo! Muchas gracias por haber participado en la rifa. ¿Me lo doy? Sí, gusta. You in here or you want to?
Whichever you prefer.
I prefer you.
I think I'll grab that.
Sí, nada más hay que cambiarlo. Sí. 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 Ok. La siguiente conferencia será en inglés, por si gustan ir por los aparatos de traducción. Nos acercamos al cierre del Taller de Innovación Educativa 2025 con la conferencia que aborda el futuro del aprendizaje en el contexto de la inteligencia artificial. Nos acompaña el Dr. Wayne Holmes, investigador de la Universidad de Londres, conocido por su trabajo sobre el uso de la IA en la educación. La conferencia se titula Inteligencia Artificial y Educación, Innovación Ética para el Aprendizaje del Futuro, y será moderada por la doctora Cristina Perales, directora del Departamento de Educación de la Ibero. Gracias, doctora Perales. Le cedo la palabra.
Muchas gracias, doctora Zoraida. Buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Esta conferencia se va a realizar en inglés, va a haber la traducción simultánea. Entonces voy a cambiar el chip y voy a hablar en inglés. To think critically and to ask ourselves, can we truly think critically and to ask ourselves, can we truly speak of educational innovation if the technologies we adopt logic of exclusion we claim to challenge? Can we truly speak of educational innovation if the technologies we adopt reproduce the same patterns that historically have segmented or discriminated? How are pedagogical relationships, power structures, and knowledge itself reshaped when we delegate educational decision to algorithmic systems? What kind of education are we building with these technologies and for whom? These crucial points need to be addressed, and I think we have done it throughout this event, in order to bring this to education understanding education and the conception of pedagogical process as a social and community and desirable project. Before giving him the floor, or the chair in this case, let me briefly introduce Wayne. Dr. Wayne Holmes is an associate professor at University College London, based at the Institute of Education, and a member of the UCL Knowledge Lab. His research focuses on the ethical, pedagogical, and social implications of artificial intelligence in teaching and learning. He has served as an advisor to UNESCO, the European Parliament, and numerous international organizations. Grounded in critical studies of technology, his work urges us to reflect in the implications of artificial intelligence in teaching and learning. Among his most influential publications are Artificial Intelligence in Education, Promise, Implications for Teaching and Learning, and The Ethics of AI in Education. Dr. Wayne will present now his lecture, Artificial Intelligence and Education, a Critical Studies Perspective.
Well, Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And also thank you to the organisers for inviting me to join you today. And thank you to all of you for still being here at this time on a Friday. Really appreciate it. And finally, thank you for allowing me to speak in English. I'm a typical Englishman and I'm very bad at any other language. So as mentioned, I'm going to be speaking about artificial intelligence and education, but taking a critical perspective about the ways we use it and how we talk about it and so on. So when I do that, I do take of dollars and pounds all the time. So I have to shout loud to get the balance right. So with that in mind, the question is, why are we talking about artificial intelligence at all? Isn't it just another tool like any other tool that we have in education? But I would argue it's not. It's qualitatively different because it's the first technology that it's the first technology to be sold as being human-like. It's also the first technology to appear human-like, and it's also the first technology to be perceived as being human-like. And this changes everything. So, the whiteboards and the computers and the internet, never before have we had this technology that seems so like us. So that's why it's important that we do talk about it. Now, one of the first things I want to point out is, AI has been around for a long time, and we've all been talking about it since ChatGPT arrived just over 2.5 years ago. But we're told that when we look at artificial intelligence, the whole purpose of it is to augment us humans. So we do what we do, and with the AI, we can do greater things. But the problem is that although this is the way it's told, and in this picture, the idea is the horse's body is the artificial intelligence, and the body, the torso, is the human. So the human's in control, but we have the strength of the AI. This is what we're told. But unfortunately, this is what we actually are seeing today. Well, actually, it's the AI that's typically in control. And we as the human, we're having to follow suit. It even changes when I just wave it. This is okay. Oh, we're back again. Okay, cool. Oh, it's okay. That's right. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so yeah, so we have to be quite careful about this. So the appearance of AI is quite challenging, and we need to think about it all very, very carefully. So anyway, we're here to talk about AI and education. And for me, AI and education, it's around everywhere. You can't, switch on the TV, look at a newspaper without somebody talking about the ways in which AI is going to enhance education. And this is a typical picture, of course, generated by AI. The problem is, for me, this is a horrible scenario. The idea that this is the future of education, I find very, very worrying. And it's true, a lot of teachers are worried about AI and education. I think they're right to be worried. But actually, I think they're probably worried about the wrong things. So in my talk, I'm going to be looking at some of the things that I think they should be thinking about. So AI in education is not just it's not just ChatGPT, it's a whole range of things. So we have, I like to separate it into these two buckets. The first bucket is teaching and learning with AI. A bit slow, sorry. Okay, which is also known as AI Ed. I have a fantastic assistant now. Thank you. Our teaching and learning about AI, which is also known as, definitely known as AI literacy. Okay, so we have these two buckets, and it's an easy way to think about these things separately. So I'm going to talk firstly about teaching and learning with AI. So this we divide into 3 sections. So if we go to the next one, please. So institution-focused AI Ed. So AI Ed, AI in education. Or we have teacher-focused AI Ed, or we have student-focused AI Ed. So these 3 categories. Now, the point is any AI Ed tool probably fits in more than one of those categories, but it's just useful to break it into this so that we can understand what's going on. So because I'm being critical, I'm not going to give you lots of detail about these tools. Lots of people will do that for you. But what I will do is just break it down. So we have institution-focused AI, and you can see here a bunch of different things, the way that AI is being used, and for admissions, for course planning, school security, and so on. So count, there's like 5 different types of AI being used in education there. So if we move on to the next group, and we have teacher-focused AI. And these tools, most of them are pretty still speculative. They're talked about in the future, but they're not really happening a great deal. But if you look here, we've got plagiarism detection, we've got classroom monitoring, we've got professional development. So here we've got, I don't know, 8 different listed here. So remember, I had 5 before, we've got 8. So we're now up to 13. Is it 8 or 7, whatever? We have a growing number of different types of AI being used in education. If we go to our third panel, and so we have the student-focused AI. So firstly, you notice there are a lot more of these. And actually, this has been the focus of most of the research of AI Eds for almost 50 years. So this is not a new thing. This has been happening a lot. And the one at the top there, the adaptive tutoring systems, there are, I don't know, 30, 40 multi-million-dollar funded companies around the world that offer these things that are being sold into schools and education systems around the world. A long list here. When you add up my 5, my 8, and this list, we're up to about 25 different types of AI being used in education. And if we can show, and you'll note in the middle there, that generative AI, ChatGPT, etc., is only one of the 25 different types. So we hear all the time people talking about AI in education. Actually, they probably only mean generative AI in education. But I want a takeaway from this meeting is that AI in education, it impacts on it in so many different ways. Okay, so having talked about the range of different types of AI in education, the next thing to think about is I want to burst that bubble. I want to attack that hype. So if we go to the next slide, please. So the first thing about these tools is we're always being told that these AI tools will save teacher time. This is the whole point, right? But that's a claim that's been made about education technology since at least the 1950s, so 75 years ago, when the psychologist B.F. Skinner introduced what he called his teaching machine. And he claimed it would save teacher time. It didn't. And actually, no ed tech since then has actually saved teacher time. And with AI today, I don't believe it's saving teacher time. So if we can go to the next. So it's not about saving time. What happens is our time is displaced. So instead of doing that, we do that. We don't save time. We just change what we do. So these kind of things, we have writing multiple prompts. You've all done this when you've used ChatGPT or the others. You have to write the prompt again and again until you get the one you like. Also, we have verifying and rewriting the outputs. So, you know, even when you've written 10 prompts, you're still not sure of the output, and you still mess around and change that as well. The next one is managing data. We need to think about the ways this is happening, particularly when we're working in classrooms. And again, we also have ensuring that what we're doing is sorted for privacy, make sure that we're not sharing things we shouldn't be sharing. Also, thinking about the ethics. Also, the next one, please, managing the student's attempts to cheat using the tools, right? This all takes time. So this idea that these tools are saving teacher time is just crazy talk. And not only that, expectation to do more, because our school leadership, our university leadership believe that these tools are saving us time, inevitably, they give us more work. So the idea that these tools save teacher time is hugely problematic. But even if they did save teacher time, is this what we want in education, where everything is automated, where there are no teachers? You might think, well, that's, you know, not really important. That's not going to happen. But it is happening. Here is a school in Texas where they have no teachers. They have adults in the classroom who have no qualifications, no experience of teaching, i.e. they're cheaper, but there are no teachers. But then you think, of course, this is Texas, right? And Texas is for the crazy people. Well, if we go to the next one, this is another one in the US. And if we go to the next one, this is one in London, coming up in a second. So it's actually happening in London as well. So it's not just a crazy USA activity, it's happening around the world. So let me repeat, these are schools that have no teachers. Why? Because apparently we can save the teacher time. So problematic. You can move to the next one. And the other thing we often hear about these tools is they will personalize the learning. And that's great, isn't it? Because at the moment, education is about everybody doing the same stuff at the same pace, in the same direction, to the same outcomes. All the students the same. And that's problematic because some students are smarter than others. And what do? Well, I have problems with this on two fronts. One, the idea that these tools that we have out there actually personalize learning is not true. As shown in the diagram, what they do is they personalize the learning pathways, but they aim to take everybody to the same destination. So that's not personalizing. For me, personalization is about helping each individual to become the best person they can become, individual. These tools don't do that. They're all about homogenizing students in efficient ways. But not only that, we go to the next slide, please. It's about taking each individual and standardizing. So it seems like it's individualizing it, but it's not. It's actually putting them all together so that they all work in the same way. And it also undermines a huge part of education. Education is not just about getting information from books or from the teacher into the heads of students. You all know, you're involved in education. Education is far more than that. One of the things we do in education, it's about collaboration. It's about the social interaction between students, between students and teachers. Is a fundamentally important part of education. But I've been in classrooms where you've got 30 students, 30 computers, and the students are ignoring the person to their left and the person to their right and ignoring the teacher. So not only is personalization not happening with AI, if it did, which it doesn't, I don't even think it's a good idea. Not only that, these tools can disempower teachers because it's the system developed by some technologists over somewhere we don't know, and who takes all the decisions and takes the decisions away from the teacher, the professional in the room. We also don't really know the impact on developing human cognition of these students. Now, the reason for showing the map is you all know I'm in Mexico City for only my second time, and we're using the Google Maps to find our way around. Well, there is evidence that those of us who use Google Maps more, actually our spatial awareness is reduced. Now, I'm not saying that's happening with AI and students. I'm saying we don't know because the research hasn't been done. So we don't know what the impact on our students is of using these tools in those educational settings. If we move on, we talk about exam monitoring. So exam monitoring during the pandemic was big, and I think it happened here. It certainly happened in my university, it happened in lots of different places. And what we have is the system monitors what the student is doing so that they can do their exam, right? So that they don't cheat is the key. But the problem with these systems is, A, most of them don't work properly. If you happen to have skin darker than mine, often the system didn't even recognize there was a person in the room at all. And so these people were rejected from participating in their examinations. There are stories of people, African black skin, who are having to have massive lamps here and here while they're doing their exams. Otherwise, the system didn't even recognize they existed. Can you imagine the extra pressure? They're exams anyway, and they have that on top. But not only that, most students can spend 10 minutes on the internet and find out ways to get around these systems. There are so many websites that explain how you can get around these systems. So they don't even do what they claim to do. But for some institutions, it looks like we're ticking the box. We're being good here. We're making sure we're protecting academic integrity. But we're not. These tools don't do that. What we are finding increasingly are tools that are being sold for purposes to support education. But actually what's happening, it's a form of surveillance. It's a form of making sure that the students are doing what the students are doing. They're doing as they should. Now, these students have some are from East Asia, but the point is this is happening all over the place. The technologies are coming out of the USA, out of Europe and everywhere. And this is quite contrary to the way that most teachers feel the work should happen in the classroom. Not only that, when we're talking about AI in education in K-12, I would argue that it undermines child rights. And so there's a range here to dignity, the child right to dignity, to autonomy, to be heard, to not suffer from discrimination and so on. So talk about the two at the bottom there, to privacy, including private thoughts. Some of these systems claim to be able to detect the emotional state of the student. Well, if that's not impacting on the child's private thoughts, I don't know what is. Very hazardous, very dangerous. To be protected from economic exploitation. So remember that long list of tools I showed you at the beginning? Most of those work online. And what happens is that the companies, because they're mostly run by companies, they extract data on a moment-by-moment basis of what the student's doing, what the student clicks, what they type, what they say, and what pages they open, etc., etc. And they use that information, that data, in order to train their models, to enhance their models. Why? Well, to make their models better. Why? So they can sell them to more schools. So the company makes profit from that data. But who's created that data? The children. So in other words, the children are effectively working as unpaid labor for these big, massive corporations. Again, I think that's a problem. So the unpaid labor is happening in all sorts of places around the world with different companies, their adaptive tutoring system, and it's being extracted and reused. The money doesn't go back to the school. The money doesn't go back to the child. It sits in the corporation. Not only that, there's commercialization through other ways. So what's happening is we think of education as a common good. We'll agree that we believe that education is right for everybody. Everybody has a right to education. But what's happening is with these tools, they're increasingly impacting on education. They're taking control of education. That's a problem. This company, Byju's, is an Indian company. They were known as the first edtech, education technology company, to be worth more than $1 billion. So we can show on the graph, they started back then in 2017. Look, they're already worth $1 billion. And by 2021, $22 billion, this one edtech company. What happened then? Almost overnight, it dropped. Now you think, well, who cares? It's a company gone bust. Well, it's important because around the country of India, hundreds, if not thousands of schools, tens of thousands of teachers, hundreds of thousands of students, if not millions, became dependent on this tool. But it's a commercial tool, subject to commercial pressures. And when it collapsed, and it gets even worse, wait, can we go back one? Go back? No, the other way. Other way, other way. There. So it's gone bankrupt now. The company doesn't even exist anymore in different ways. So it's a huge problem when we depend on the commercial organization. Okay, so if we go to the next slide. So the point I want to make as well is that all of those long list of tools I showed you, we have no independent evidence at scale for either the effectiveness or the safety or the positive impact in the classroom. And the reason is the picture behind it is because if this was medicine, if you go to a place and get your medicine, you tend to go, you want to buy a medicine that's been tested properly. And it's given to you by somebody who's an expert in medicine, a doctor who's qualified. But that doesn't work with EdTech. You know, you can be down the local cafe and somebody says, hey, I've seen this new tool. Why don't we use that? Okay, but we've got no evidence for its effectiveness, its safety, or its positive impact. We wouldn't do that with medicine when we're talking about the physical body. So why are we doing that when we're talking about the child's developing brain? Okay, this one, we've got to be very careful with this one. Okay, so one of the things we hear about all the time is the notion of the digital divide, right? We talk about it all the time. And we know that our students from more wealthy situations, more wealthy backgrounds, they have access to technology, whereas you all know as students who don't have access to technology because they're from poorer backgrounds. This is the digital divide. And what we're thinking is that the more we don't think about this, the worse it's going to get. The difference between rich and poor is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is probably true, but this is where it's going to work. I like to think, for me, it's actually, we flip this. So if you go, okay, bit of animation there, bit exciting. So I think the digital divide is flipping, and it's flipping for this reason. You do one. So what's going to happen in the future is those students who have money will be able to afford to have human teachers, whereas those students who are poor will make do with computers. Now, you might say this is a ridiculous thing that Wayne's saying. It's already happening. So we need to pay attention. We need to think about these things and be very, very careful. So yes, the digital divide is important, but let's not forget when it flips. Okay, back to my two buckets. We talked about AI Ed. I'm now going to go on to teaching and learning about AI literacy. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, then for this, I break it down into 3 dimensions: the practical, the technological, and the human. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at these in a bit more detail. But before I do, if you can go to the next slide, I like to think about this in terms of a metaphor. So if you want to be able to control a car, then you need to know something about how a car works, how to control the car, the fact that we need to put petrol in the car, the fact that what the pedals do and the big wheel, right? We need to know that kind of stuff if you want to be able to use a car. There is some argument that actually, if you know a little bit about how the car works, then that might help and improve how you use the car. But I think most of you would agree that before we allow people out there in the car, particularly in cities like Mexico City, we need to be really careful about understanding the rules of the road, how we make it safe, how we protect other road users, pedestrians, cyclists, and so on. So we've got these 3 dimensions. So if you go to our next one, please. So how do we translate this into AI? Well, using all this kind of stuff, we have websites like this. There are thousands of websites like this that tell you how to use generative AI. There are thousands. Pretty boring, if you ask me. But anyway, there are thousands of them. If we go back to understanding a bit about the engine, then I think we need to be very careful to help our people, our students and our teachers understand a little bit about how these things work. So we need to be careful with this one, okay? So this picture represents how AI kind of works. So the baby represents here the AI system, okay? The mother represents the training data represents the AI engineer, and the dad represents the training data. And the way it works is the engineer is saying, this is what daddy is. Okay, so the next one, please. So this is what daddy is. Next one, please. Or that's what daddy is. Or next one, please. Oh, that's what daddy is. Okay. And this is how AI works. It's all about training it to recognize patterns. But often the problem is it recognizes the wrong patterns. We need to be careful. So when we think about the safety of driving our car, I also think we need to think about the impact on safety with AI. So if we can go to the next one. So I'm going to focus on this one. So we've got the technological dimension, we've got the practical dimension, but I'm going to focus on the human dimension because I think it's the most important. So a lot of the time, our AI engineer colleagues are telling us, AI is not magic. It looks like magic, right? When it does these amazing things, that's like magic. And I agree with the engineers. It's not magic. In a sense, it's not real magic like Harry Potter. Okay? However, it is like stage magic. So here we have David Copperfield and we have a woman floating in the air. We know she's not floating in the air, right? We know it's a trick, but it looks amazing. Well, my point is, this is what AI is. It looks amazing, but it's a trick. And what we have to do is we have to understand how that trick works so that we can understand how AI should be used, could be used, might be used. One of the other things we know about AI is it can be used, thank you, it can be used for deep fakes. Now, some deep fakes, you know, look, we're kind of hopeful about them, but we also know there are a lot of situations where deep fakes are not good things. We had a situation in Spain just a couple of years ago where young boys from a village pasted the faces of the girls from the village onto naked pornographic models, right? This is not good. So we need to be aware of issues like deep fakes and the ways in which these things can happen. And these deep fakes are getting more powerful day by day. The next one. So here's one thing, you know, using AI. So who is this? The AI says it's this person. Now, can you notice something specific about the difference between these two people? It's kind of important, right? If you go to the next one. Okay, so this young woman, she wanted to put her image onto LinkedIn to get a new job. And so she put the image into one of the tools and said, make me look more professional. Very reasonable. Make me look more professional. And this is what it did. I mean, it's funny, but it's also quite frightening, right? And why is this? It's because of the training data. In the training data, white women from Europe, from places like Mexico, USA, are far more dominant in the training data than Asian women. And so therefore, this is what it does. So this just illustrates the kind of ways these things don't work. Other thing we need to know is that generative AI is by definition theft. Because what they've done is they've gone out into the internet and they've grabbed everything. They've not just grabbed your websites, they've grabbed books. So any of you here have written a book or an academic paper, I guarantee that Meta had stolen your paper, your book, and put it into the training data. And there's actually a website you can go to where you put in your name of your paper and it will tell you, yes, Meta used it or not. It's theft. And there are many court cases going through at the moment. They're going to take years where they're being accused of theft. And we don't know the outcome of those court cases. But I'm sorry, I'm quite clear. It's theft. It's not only that. AI is effectively working as AI colonialism, a new form of colonialism. So particularly in countries in the global south, where data is being extracted from those countries, whenever those people in those countries use the websites or the generative AI or the social media, that's been extracted. So a country like Pakistan, millions of people, but the data's going. Pakistan doesn't have it. It's been taken away and being used mainly by companies in the USA, companies in Europe, companies in China. It's been extracted. But not only that, it's colonialism in the other direction. You've all seen it. Still, a lot of this stuff is English. And so the way in which it uses, when you use it, it kind of imposes an Englishness on you, despite the fact that you are Mexicans and your Spanish is your first language. Who cares? The AI system imposes. So it's this two directions of AI colonialism that we need to be very careful of. And what about AI and humans? We're always told that AI is out there. It does these amazing things, but AI doesn't work without humans. So this is another one. Bing, bing, bing. So the first one is a human sets the objectives, a human chooses and cleans the data, a human labels the data. So in this one, so in places like Kenya, Venezuela, there are whole companies where the job of the person, they sit there and they look at video footage from these so-called autonomous cars and they label it. Frame 1, there's a car, there's a person, there's a car. Frame 2, there's a person, there's a car, there's a car. Frame 3, there's a person, there's a car, there's a car. That's their job. The point is, without those people, AI wouldn't work at all. it's fundamentally important that we have these so-called ghost workers of AI. Without the ghost workers of AI, AI would not work. Next one, please. AI designs the network. Also, a human trains the network. A human curates the outputs. And importantly, humans in the big commercial companies, they're the ones who are in control. So when we think about AI as being somehow independent and neutral and unbiased, no, it's controlled by people. AI never wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to do something. It's a person in a big corporation who says, this is what we're going to get the AI to do. We need to be very careful about things. These are the kind of things we need our teachers to understand. Any ideas where this represents? Yeah, the Netherlands. So why am I showing it? I'm showing it because today, AI systems use more power than the entire country of the Netherlands. And it's predicted that in the near future, it will be using as much power as India, the most populous country in the world. That's a lot of power. Quite difficult to understand. But if we go to the next one. So if you imagine that block on the left there represents when we turn one light bulb on for 1 minute. Okay, if you do a Google search, it uses about the same amount of electricity. You do a ChatGPT thing, it uses an awful lot of electricity. So every time you use ChatGPT, you're using that much more electricity than if you did a Google search. I'm not saying you shouldn't use ChatGPT. I'm saying you need to be aware of these issues, and most people are not. Anybody recognize this? This is 3 Mile Island, famous for the first nuclear meltdown in the USA some years ago, decades ago. The reason I'm showing it is because our lovely friends at Microsoft are reopening it because they need more electricity. I think this is a problem. But it's not just energy, it's also water. So Microsoft alone, they use something like 47,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water every month just to cool down their server stations where they host their AI. Again, that's a big number, right? And difficult to understand. So let's go to the next one. So this is an email written by ChatGPT or written with ChatGPT. And you think, how much water for this one email? This much. To do that one email, use on average 300 milliliters of water. This is a problem. These are the kind of things that our teachers, our students need to understand. Not only that, it's the output of carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases. So to train ChatGPT alone, the first big model, it generated as much carbon dioxide as it would do if you drove a car from here to the moon and back. That's a lot of carbon dioxide. Again, we need people to understand this. I'll let you read this. So we've always been promised that AI is going to solve all these wonderful things so that we can relax and do the creative things, write poetry and make movies. But actually what's happened is completely reverse. AI is doing all these wonderful creative things, apparently, and we're still cleaning the dishes and cleaning the kitchen. Okay, so that was some of the kind of issues about AI in general that I think teachers and students should know. But what about Gen AI in particular? So obviously you all know ChatGPT, but you are probably aware that there are many others, and these are just a tiny fraction of the companies out there that are offering these kind of tools now. But it's even more complicated than that, because actually tools are being built on top of tools. So you might use a tool that doesn't look like ChatGPT, but actually it's using ChatGPT. So it's a very complex picture that's beginning to emerge. So again, this is a difficult one. So this is how generative AI works. Now, we have some engineers in the room. They know this better than me. But anyway, we have our prompts, which you're all used to writing. So here's the prompt. Which was the first elephant to swim across the English Channel? Reasonable prompt. And what the system does, it predicts the best next word. So it predicts the. and then it predicts first. So it's predicting what's the next best word. Elephant, because it's from the prompt, right? It goes on to swim, across. And so it's predicting, and it ends up with an amazing paragraph, okay? You've all done this 100 times. You know this. And when we read that paragraph, it's incredibly impressive. It's incredibly believable. But it's nonsense, right? Because no elephant has ever swum across the English Channel. So it's utter garbage. But it looks definitive. It looks amazing. Now, you as adults and professionals and academics and teachers, you look at this and you know. Think about our young learners. And I don't just mean primary school and secondary school, I mean universities as well. Because we're seeing increasingly that they are willing to just take this information and assume it's correct. That's a huge problem. Next one. So here's an example of that. Anybody see a problem with this? Okay, so draw me a kitchen with absolutely no polar bear in it. How about this one? It looks a really good X-ray, yeah? You can imagine this being used in teaching students about the human anatomy. Anybody recognize anything here? Please? Yeah. We don't have 3 bones in this part of our arm. We only have 2. But it looks real, doesn't it? It looks amazing. So you can understand how students can get fooled into thinking that they're getting good information when they are not. We need our teachers, we need our students to understand this. One of the things that everybody says is that all these problems that Wayne's talking about, don't worry, we'll wait just another couple of years and all the problems will be fixed. Because look at the shoot up, it's been amazing. It's gone dramatic, the changes with these technologies. But all innovation does this, and what it does next is this. It flattens out. And we're already seeing this happening with the large language models, the ChatGPTs and the others. So the big leap was when the first one came out, and since then, we've had just little tiny increments of change. It's definitely flattening. This is the advantage of these large language models for students. The great thing is, I just write a bullet point and it writes the essay. That's cool. So students don't need to do the work anymore. But it's not just students, of course. It's teachers. We can take the essay and we can get ChatGPT to turn it into one bullet point and I can use that. So actually, we don't need that middle ground at all. Actually, thinking about it, we don't even need the teachers because the AI can do the assessment, right? So we don't need the teacher. Thinking about it, we don't even really need the students. You know, this is obviously absurd, but this is where this is taking us. Okay, what this represents is creativity. So I want you to imagine that this part of the universe represents the creativity of one teacher. And they get to use ChatGPT to help them write their lesson plan or whatever it might be. And I accept that their creativity increases. They think of new ideas or the ChatGPT suggests new things. So we end up, it grows. So to that much. So for an individual teacher, maybe their creativity is enhanced. But I'm more interested in all of us. So if this picture represents everybody's, all teachers' creativity, the problem is that what happens is it reduces all teachers' creativity to the same creativity as the one individual teacher. So it might look to the individual that creativity is being enhanced, but to everybody, us across the world, creativity has been narrowed. And one quick example on this, friends of mine at the United Nations in the USA, in New York, they run the youth office and they often have projects and young people from around the world apply to participate in these projects. And they have a couple of standard questions that they ask. And what they're finding now is that the answers they're getting to those questions from around the world, from Latin America, from Africa, from East Asia, the answers are the same. I don't mean they look the same. I don't mean they have the same kind of ideas. I mean they are word for word the same. Because what they're doing is they're taking the question and putting it in as the prompt. And so it's given them the same output. And so people from around the world, young people around the world, are writing the same. So each individual student thinks, hey, this is kind of cool. I would not have thought of this. But when we think about humanity in general, this is what's happening. It's narrowing our creativity. It is not enhancing it. And one of the other things we hear about is that these tools are great for summarization, right? We don't need to read PDFs anymore because the GPT can do it for us. We only need to read a couple of paragraphs. So I thought, I'm going to try this out. So this is a report that I wrote, and I took this thing about intelligence, and I copied this into a ChatGPT, and I gave it this prompt that summarized the text and gave it that text. Hit the button, and this is what it gave me. Okay, and that looks great, right? That's impressive. But being me, I didn't stop there. I said, do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. And do it again. So the point is that if you push it, it does it lots of different ways. And so the thing that the lesson here is there's not one summary. So it doesn't generate the summary, the one and only summary. It generates one of many possible summaries. But it looks like it's definitive. It looks like it's the one. The most important point is it doesn't generate the summary that you would have generated if you had made the summary. So again, it looks like it's saving us time, but it's really narrowing our experience. Not just me. So here's an academic paper published just a few days ago. And here they found that summarization tools used on academic papers were 5 times less accurate than those summarized by humans. So it's not just, this one-off. They're inaccurate as well. But they look good, don't they? They look amazing. We need people to understand this. We also need to understand that these tools, when they're shown, they're meant to help everybody. Right? These tools are great for students, it helps students. But actually, we're finding that students are becoming increasingly stressed. So if you go back 3 years ago, before ChatGPT, students got stressed about their essays, about their examinations, about all that stuff, right? But here we are today, they're still stressed about all that. But now they're stressed about generative AI. Should I use it? If I don't use it, maybe I will fall behind the others in my class. If I do use it, that's a bit naughty, isn't it? If I do use it, maybe I'll get found out and maybe I'll be kicked off my course. But most worrying, they're worried about if I don't use it, I might still be accused of using it. And that's not just me. There's a huge range of stories of students being kicked off their courses, being accused of using generative AI, and they swear blind they didn't. So it was meant to make students' lives easier, and it's not. It's making their lives more stressed. What we're also finding is students are becoming over-reliant on the AI. So there was a study done fairly recently, looking at ChatGPT 4, looking at it, and how this helps students with their work. And as you can see, access, it improves outcomes. Fantastic, right? That's what everybody thinks. This is supposed to be, this is a good thing. It's improving. But the problem is when they took GPT-4 away from the student, those students then did worse than the students who'd never had the access to the GPT-4 in the first place. We need our teachers and students to understand this kind of stuff. One of the things we've talked about this before and has been speaking with colleagues is about the writing of essays. And the problem is that when we hear OpenAI and the other companies suggesting why students should find these tools useful, it's because they're confusing the output of a piece of writing with the process of doing the writing. And we don't ask our students to do write essays because we want to collect essays. At home, I've got essays on my wall. We don't want that. That's ridiculous. We ask students to write essays because of the process they go through when they're writing the essays. So if that process is replaced with writing a prompt or two, then the learning is gone. We need our teachers and students to understand that. So this picture summarizes how I think we should understand the output of generative AI. Again, it's a click, click, click. So firstly, generative AI output is, it looks human-like, right? Point is, it isn't. It looks accurate, but it isn't. It looks definitive, but it isn't. It looks intelligent, but it isn't. It looks as if it understands, but I promise you, it really doesn't. We need our teachers and students to understand this before they make choices about whether to use these technologies or not. Perfect. Okay, so sorry, go back. Go forward. Perfect. Okay, so this picture, the complexity represents the complexity of the world. Okay, it's a very simple complexity of the world, but you get what I mean. So imagine this is the complexity. So you put all this data into a Gen AI model, and what does it do? It takes all this data, all this rich difference, this complexity, and it turns it to this. Blech. So it's an average. It averages out all that stuff. And in so doing, what it's doing is it's reinforcing standardized views. So for us, for you guys in Mexico, for us in Europe, it's reinforcing standardized Silicon Valley views. We are subject to those views. And what's happening here is that voices that are marginalized are being increasingly marginalized by these technologies. And remember those ghost workers? Well, when ChatGPT was trained, those ghost workers in Kenya, Venezuela, and other countries, they had to look at the early versions of ChatGPT before we, the public, got to see it. And so they were exposed to some disgusting materials over and over and over again. It led to mental health breakdowns. It led to relationship breakdowns. People really suffered. And they were paid like $4 a day for doing this work. But without them, none of you would have ChatGPT today. Now, I'm not saying don't use ChatGPT. I'm saying remember these people before you choose whether to use it or not. This is a recent publication, you can see, May 18th. And this is what we're learning. So these idea that these chatbots are doing amazing things in business isn't true. So this survey, looking at 7,000 workplaces, found that it did not improve incomes of anybody, and it did not improve time spent. This is not what we're told, right, by the industry. But this is what we're finding out more and more frequently. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening to me. I'm now going to finish off with a couple of points. So firstly, we know that AI looks amazing, right? It's incredible. And I'm constantly impressed by the skills of our engineering colleagues who develop this stuff, no question. But we need to be more careful and think about actually what's there. So the picture is not necessarily as clear as we think it is. We need to be very careful. And this is called the Turk. I can't remember the Turk. Yeah, we call it Amazon Turk. Anyway, the Turk. The point is, this was a mechanical, essentially a robot, that toured the courts of Europe, all the kings, and showed them that the robot could play chess. And you can imagine, this is in the 18th century, going around the courts of Europe, and people are just blown away. There's a robot that can play chess. This is extraordinary. So the appearance is amazing. But the reality is inside, there was a human. So that disconnect between the appearance of amazingness and the reality we need to keep in front of our mind. I like to think, so some of you are old like me, you can remember the time when there were advertisements where doctors were saying, If you're feeling a bit stressed, have a cigarette. So cigarettes were being prescribed as a way of dealing with the troubles of the world. But now we know, we've known for some time, that cigarettes are not good for us. Oh, they know us. We know that cigarettes are not good for us at all. I kind of feel that maybe we're in this stage with AI, where it looks amazing and people are saying you can do all these wonderful things with it, but the reality is it's not. And maybe we're going to find that out in the coming years. So when we think of AI, I kind of represent it with this beautiful lake. It looks amazing. It looks wonderful. It looks inviting. We all want to jump in. But I bet you wouldn't jump into that lake if you didn't have an idea of what was underneath the surface. And that's what we need to be aware of. Okay, so I've given you lots of complaints. So how do we deal with this? So I think we need to do two things. We need to do a top-down approach and we need a bottom-up approach. Okay, the top-down approach is we need regulation. So this is some work I'm doing at the Council of Europe. So this affects 46 countries in Europe. But other countries around the world look to the Council of Europe and they say, oh, they've done that. It's quite interesting. So my fingers crossed that maybe the Mexican government will look to that as well, if we are successful. And what we're trying to do is to develop legislation that will regulate the use of AI in educational settings, much as our medicines are regulated. It's not to prevent it being used, it's to make sure that it's used properly and safely, that it supports and doesn't undermine education. So that's the top-down approach, but there's also the bottom-up approach, and that's in two parts. So there's critical AI literacy I've mentioned before. So it's about understanding all those myriad things I talked about. And that was only the surface of the kind of topics. So it's not just about, the next one, please, the technological and the practical dimensions, you know, how it works and how to use it. Most importantly, it's about the human dimension. I think we can press it again. So the human dimension, that's fundamental. So what is the impact of these tools on us as humans, on human rights, on human relationships, on the environment, on the empowerment and agency, all those myriad things. So again, at the Council of Europe, we're developing AI literacy and we're focusing on the human dimension. And this is, again, you know, both of these sets of work, they're going to take a long time if we're successful. But if we are successful, and I will be really proud of the fact that we have protected millions of young people from these big commercial organizations that are more interested in profit than they are in the lives and safety of young people. So I would argue if you're not literate in the human dimension of AI, then you're not really AI literate. And if a teacher is not AI literate, then they're not able to make informed decisions about whether, where, when to use AI in education. So thank you very much for listening for me this long. And have one more thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Wayne, for such a challenging, thought-provoking, and clear presentation. I think we have a better understanding on how the AI in education field looks like. I also believe that this was an exercise in critical AI education, so thank you very much. You also remind us that education remains above all a human endeavor, as does CI as well. And from what you presented to us, I keep thinking about this idea of time displacement and how I don't think any of us would say I am definitely less stressed because I use generative tools. I also think about how it looks like an individual choice. So we each decide if we're going to use it or not, but it has such implications for our communities and for societies in general, for our planet as well. But at the same time, it becomes harder and harder to choose as an individual, because you now open a Google search and the first thing that you get is an integrated AI generative summary of what you're looking for. So I think we need to push in terms of or human capability of making choices regarding this. I think that's very important. But I also keep thinking about your images of students in here. So it's one student sitting in front of an individual desk or shared by someone, but not necessarily seeing each other. This whole body performativity that brings AI with it, that you have to be seated down, looking at the computer, or bodies also change regarding to that. So I think they're very interesting things that you have brought on to us. Thank you so much. So we're now gonna open the floor for questions and dialogue. If you're here in the auditorium, please feel free to raise your hand, make a reflection, make a comment. Make sure that we have enough space for most of us to express our opinions. So keep it concrete and without using ChatGPT for it, but using concrete and to the point, I would say. If you wanna address it in Spanish, I'll be happy to do the translation. So, si lo quieren hacer en español, con mucho gusto yo le traduzco a Wayne al respecto.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your overwhelming presentation. Thank you very much. I am Claudia Camacho from the Institute for the Future of Education here in Mexico. And I heard you 2 years ago when you were right here in the same room. And you actually changed my point of view about AI. And what I did after I heard you speaking is that I called 25 of my students and I actually teach them how to use ChatGPT. That was in May 2 years ago, and I did what you just suggest, like teach them some basics on AI. And after that, I asked them to make set of regulations, well, not regulations because they cannot regulate, but recommendations of use for the students. And they really were amazing with all their recommendations, starting by saying that the problem is very complex. It's so complex that for creating regulations, it should be concerned. It should be a concern not only for one person or one organization or one government, but it should be a concern for the whole society. So they called for the approach, the bottom-up approach instead of the top-down. And that for me was like really, really amazing because it demonstrated that if a 22-year student can understand that and can give such a wise recommendations, then we all can, right? So I think that thinking of the regulation just from the top-down approach, it's kind of, I don't know how to say, but maybe it could be limited. Don't you think so? Well, my work was published in Educon, and it's called Regulations for Engineering Undergraduates. So I would like to know if you agree with this, if you agree with them, that the problem is so complex that we should go through regulations that go from a bottom-up approach instead of a top-down approach. Thank you.
I think you mentioned the top-down, the bottom-up approaches, and yeah, so the top-down approach and regulation, I think is fundamentally important, but it's not enough on its own. So the bottom-up is also important to get the students to engage. But I think, I hear a lot of the time we are getting our students to explore and try these tools and see how it works, etc. And I applaud that, but it's not enough. Because, I've shown you today a bunch of things I'm guessing you weren't aware of, and I'm guessing your students are not aware of. So it's not sufficient for teachers and students just to explore these tools. We also need them to have guidance. So they need to understand the things like the impact on the environment, the impact on human rights. They're not going to stumble across that just by playing with the tools. So I agree that we need both the top down and the bottom up. One without the other is not going to do it. But the bottom up is not sufficiently addressed with the students and the teachers just exploring the tools. That's good. It's not enough, nowhere near enough. We need them to have understanding and awareness of the many issues I shared today and the many others I haven't had time to share with you.
Hola. Yo tuve la oportunidad de trabajar para el Ministerio de Educación por 12 años desarrollando recursos educativos y noto en las nuevas generaciones de diseñadores un cierto escenario desolador, pues sienten que su profesión ha quedado ya en el olvido y que van a ser reemplazados por la inteligencia artificial. ¿De qué manera podemos devolver la esperanza a todas estas actividades creativas que se ven amenazadas? Pues ahora se dice que las personas que van a tener ahora trabajo son aquellas que saben manejar inteligencia artificial. Y estas actividades que tienen que ver con el ejercicio de crear y lo artístico están llevándose algo relegadas. Y los estudiantes de estas áreas están ya con un aire de desesperanza, viendo cómo sus trabajos están siendo sustituidos por este tipo de tecnología. ¿Hasta qué punto es válido, es ético y es viable integrarlo? ¿Y de qué manera podemos devolver a estas nuevas generaciones la esperanza de que lo creativo sigue siendo humano?
Their artists were being replaced by AI. And the main question is how do we give back hope? And how do we serve the possibility, the validity, the sustainability of thinking about creative endeavors as human and well.
I think the first thing to confirm is that AI is not creative, right? It just isn't. The creativity comes from the person that's using it as a tool. And so can AI replace human creativity? No, it absolutely cannot. But the problem is, and I accept this, that some bosses believe it can. But there are also lots of examples of companies around the world who are sacking their workers because they say now we can do this with generative AI instead. And then a few months down the road, they are suddenly realizing that they need those workers. So they brought them back in again. So we're in a very, fluid situation at the moment. So I think, the hope is, I have to be straight here that I'm not talking about AI that might exist in 20 or 30 years' time. I have no idea. But I'm talking about the technologies we have today and those that we can predict for the near future. And I'm very comfortable with saying that they're not creative. So we need to just keep going and reinforcing to people that actually these tools, they can be useful at times, but they're not that useful. And if you look at most of the images created by the tool, they have a real samey feeling about them. One of the things we often hear is that these technologies create new material. Well, they don't create new material. That's a myth. What they do is they take lots of old materials and squidge them together. So there's no novelty there really, but to the individual, it might seem as being novel. But to the boss, yeah, this is the problem. So I think we need to convince the boss more than we need to convince ourselves. We just need to keep going and ask them these questions.
Just in Spanish or English?
Yes. Thanks so much, Professor, for the lecture, the small lecture about AI. I just have a quick question. What about water? what type of water is being used there? Is it water that we can drink? Is it water from the ocean? You mentioned 33 milliliters per per interaction with AI, but what type of water is it, and who are the companies that are mostly or mainly causing this water waste?
Where the water that AI is using, what type of water is it, and in which region of the world it's located mostly, right?
Mostly, which companies are wasting so
Which
much water
companies
producing it? And
using
what
it?
type, like, is it water that we can drink, or is it like water from the ocean that is salted water, or what is it?
Yeah, sorry, I should apologize. I had poor hearing,
Oh,
which
it's
is
all
why I
right.
didn't hear you properly. I'm sorry. So the places it's happening are places where the land is cheap. So there are places in North Mexico where the land is cheap. So US companies are coming there and they are building service stations because the land is cheap. But then the service stations use enormous amounts of water from that area. So it means that people who live there have no access to the water. So we have many situations where the service station has lots of water. They've done a deal with the local authority so we can extract this water. But nobody thought about the people who live there and the fact they need water to drink and water to clean themselves and water to grow their crops. So that really isn't being taken into account. And in terms of who is doing this, it's all the big companies. So it's Apple, it's Gemini, it's Meta, it's Microsoft. They're all doing this, all in lots of places. So there are lots of places in the southern states. There are definitely places in northern Mexico, but there are other places around the world. As I say, anywhere where the big company thinks the land is cheap, where they can do a deal with the local authority to get access to the water and the land. So this is an awful situation. In fact, I had a situation where a guy from one of the big companies said to me, Wayne, you don't understand. You know, in your car, you have your radiator and the water's there and it just circulates, right? So it's not using water. This is utter nonsense, right? Water is being used to cool and it's being evaporated to the environment. And so if you look at Microsoft's own, they do reports every so often, and they use the word consume. Now, consume means you use it, it's gone. It hasn't gone forever. It's gone back into the atmosphere, back into the sea, whatever, but it has to be reprocessed either through rivers or through mechanical systems so that we humans can use it again. So, yeah, I think this is a huge problem that we really need to address and think about very, very carefully, because it's really negatively affecting some areas of the world that already don't have much water, and yet the service stations are taking what water they do have.
Thank you.
Hi, Professor Holmes. Fabiola Garcia, lecturer from Universidad Iberoamericana. Thank you very much for being here. Very quick questions. The first one is, what will be the solution, or what is the current solution for decreasing the use of energy in the servers? Because obviously, as you mentioned, it's huge and the carbon footprint is really worrying, especially nowadays that we have so little investment to basically diminish climate change. And the second one is, if you could please highlight the central points of the European Union regulation regarding artificial intelligence besides data protection, that will be great. Thank you.
Thank you. I've lost track now. What was it? Yeah. Okay. So I need to go sideways here a bit. For me, I think about AI technologies and AI approaches having two possible routes. One is where it has direct impact on humans. And all the things I showed you was that kind of AI. AI in education is directly impacting on teachers and students. But then there's a whole other world of AI that's about that indirectly impacts on us. So, for example, there is a lot of work using AI systems to monitor the currents of water through the oceans and how they're changing because of climate change. There's AI systems being used to monitor deforestation in Brazil. So they're important for us as humans, but they're not directly addressing us at the moment by moment. And those kind of uses of AI, I think, are really important, and they make good sense to me. But in order to do this, in order to monitor deforestation, climate change, etc., we're using power. We're generating carbon dioxide. So all of these systems are having this impact on energy use, on climate change, while they're directed at helping us address this. So this is a huge problem, and I simply don't have the answer. But there are people working very hard to reduce the power usage of these tools. But it's a long struggle. Yeah, sure. So the first thing I have to point out is not the EU. So the EU is an economic group of countries, and my country, the UK, for reasons I still don't understand, removed ourselves from it. You've probably heard the word Brexit. What I'm talking about is another organization which is older than the EU. It's called the Council of Europe, and it's the European version of UNESCO. It's about human rights, democracy, rule of law. And so if you're asking me what are the key things that were going into the legislation, to be perfectly honest, I can't tell you. Not because I'm being secretive, but we just haven't got that far. It's been a slow process. It's taken us 2 years to get to this point where we're now beginning to have those conversations. But no, there's nothing that we've agreed on so far. I mean, the kind of things are that before, at the moment, if a school or a university wants to use an AI tool, they have to judge it for themselves. And they can only judge it on what's in front of them. So all that background information, which I maintain is so important, they don't know that. So they can't judge it on that. So one of the possibilities is there becomes some kind of overarching, they call it a clearinghouse, where you're an ed tech company, you take it to this organization and they will test it for all the different things. And if it passes that test, then it can be sold into schools. And so, you know, the regulation could be, it must have passed those tests to check that it's effective, that it's safe, that it doesn't use too much energy, etc., before it can be used. And a lot of people then say, well, two things. One is you're stifling innovation by doing that. Well, again, I point you to the pharmaceutical industry, right? They go through the rigorous testing you can imagine. They're one of the most creative industries on the planet. So I don't buy that. The other thing that is actually a positive is, as I say, Council of Europe, 46 countries across Europe. So if you are an edtech company and you get it checked in this organization I mentioned, the cool thing is you can then sell it to the other 45 countries. You don't have to do it again. So it's even good for the edtech industry. So that's the kind of thing. But the details, as I say, I can't share. So we haven't decided yet.
Gracias, profesor. Buenas tardes. Me encantó la manera en que nos hace usted, en que nos ha hecho reflexionar sobre hacia dónde vamos con la inteligencia artificial. Mi aportación es muy sencilla, nada más es comentar que creo que deberíamos de retomar como sociedad, como individuos participantes de estos cambios, mirar hacia la ética. Hay una autora en España, la profesora de la Cortina, que seguramente muchos la hemos leído, que habla de 4 principios básicos en el ejercicio de las profesiones. Uno de ellos es la autonomía, en la que todos tenemos el derecho de informarnos sobre lo que queremos aprender y hacer. El segundo principio, que es la justicia, que habla de esa capacidad de repartir para todos los individuos los beneficios que se producen en la sociedad. Un tercer principio, que es el principio de beneficencia, que todo lo que se haga, que lo que hagamos como profesionistas debe de aportar un beneficio a la sociedad y a los seres humanos. Y el cuarto principio que habla de la no maleficencia, no causar daño a las demás personas. Entonces creo que ese sería uno de los puntos en los que deberíamos de pensar hacia adelante, hacia el futuro, cuando estamos al frente de nuestros alumnos, cuando impartimos, cuando innovamos, cuando creamos, el guiarlos basándonos en algunos de estos principios de ética. Muchas gracias, profesor.
Ethics in Western Europe has a history of 2,000 years. In East Asia, it's even longer. In India, it's longer. In the Muslim world, it's longer. In South America, Latin America, I don't know, to be perfectly honest, but I imagine there's... Exactly. So the discussions around ethics have been going on a long time, and there is no universal agreement. So the principles that you mentioned, I completely agree. They are a good set of principles. There's a researcher, Italian, used to be in Oxford, is now in Yale, and that's exactly the set of principles that he comes up with. I think he has a fifth one as well, I can't remember. But that's one approach, and there are many different approaches. If you talk to most people in the industry, the people who are developing it, they actually use a very simple approach to ethics, technically known as consequentialism, one version utilitarianism. So to give one example, they use a lot the idea with the self-driving cars, have what they call the trolley bus problem. So that, you know, the kind of bus that runs on rails like a train. And the idea is the train is coming along, the trolley bus is coming along, and if it goes in a straight line, it will kill 4 people. But there's a lever that turns it to a different track, and if you do that, it will kill 1 person. So the question is, what should the system do? Should it go ahead and kill the 4, or should it go to the and kill the 1? It's obviously it's a ridiculous question, frankly. But it's that kind of question that a lot of people in the AI industry focus on. They think this is, if we understand this, we're going to be able to solve things, and we can make technical decisions about it. But there's another field of ethics in Western Europe, known as, a lovely word, deontology. But basically what it means, it's about rights. And so I kind of like this approach where we know that 190 countries around the world have agreed a very comprehensive set of human rights and a very comprehensive set of child rights, as I showed you. Well, I showed you just the top, few of them. But they've been agreed by 190 countries, and they're constantly being enhanced and developed over time. And so for me, I'm not saying if we stick with the human rights, we solve everything, but at least it gives us something to target. So if we look at a technology and it undermines a particular human right, then I think we should stop and think very carefully about this. So as I mentioned, the idea of the companies extracting data from the child's use of their technologies, that fundamentally undermines a child right agreed by the 190 countries. So we need to take stock. We need to stop and think about that. And, this is never mentioned. The companies are quite happy to do it.
Thank you very much. So Wayne, thank you for reminding us that critical thinking and putting humans first with the rights as well. It's the first step in developing all educational processes. And if we think about a truly transformative educational innovation, we also need to make sure that it is what we actually want as humans. So on behalf of the Universidad Iberoamericana and the entire TIE 2025 organizing team, we are sincerely grateful for your time, your insights, and your unwavering commitment to a moral, just, ethical, and human-centered approach to education. I think we have a small token of appreciation here.
Agradecemos al doctor Wayne Holmes por su participación y a la doctora Perales por la moderación y a ustedes por acompañarnos.
Llegamos al momento de cierre y reflexión de esta intensa y gran jornada del Taller de Innovación Educativa 2025, Tejiendo Redes para afrontar nuevos desafíos. Para ofrecernos unas palabras de cierre, contamos con la presencia de dos personas clave en este proceso. La doctora Ximena Chao Rebolledo, directora general de Planeación Estratégica e Innovación de la Ibero Ciudad de México, y el doctor Luis Medina Gual, director de Innovación Educativa de la Universidad Iberoamericana, Ciudad de México. Les cedo la palabra con profundo agradecimiento por hacer esto posible.
Bueno, pues primero que nada, de verdad, agradecerle a todas y a todos por estar aquí, ¿no? Yo me gustaría darles dos mensajes clave y un favorzote. El primer mensaje clave que me gustaría decirles es que espero que esta haya sido un evento de interés para todas y todos ustedes, que como lo ha sido en las últimas ediciones, es un evento que busca ser abierto, accesible a todo público y en ese sentido gratis. Y el segundo tema es también que reflexiones un poco acerca de las temáticas que se vieron en este taller, que si bien hubo bastante centralidad de la parte ética, también se discutieron temas de equidad y de justicia social. Y desde la parte de IA, ¿no? A diferencia quizá de muchos espacios donde se incita un poco más a la parte, digamos, como de grandes desarrollos, ¿no? Aquí, como diría de Mandalorian, this is the way. Buscamos también equilibrar un poco con esta parte crítica y por eso agradecemos muchísimo a estos invitados como Mr. Professor Wayne Holmes. Entonces, de verdad, muchísimas gracias. Y el favor que les voy a pedir es 4 rounds of applauses, ¿ok? El primero es para todo el equipo de la Dirección de Innovación Educativa, en específico a mi querida Sos, a Marco y a Carlita, que estuvieron trabajando. El segundo es a todo el equipo de la DGPI que estuvo también trabajando a lo largo de este evento y también al apoyo, por ejemplo, de otras instancias como la DIT, que estuvo apoyando para poder desarrollar todos los avances que les mostramos y también desde luego a todo el equipo de espacios institucionales que nos estuvo apoyando durante este evento. Un segundo gran round of applause. El tercer, ya casi termino, no se preocupen, es para todas y todos los invitados, conferencistas, también todos los sponsors que estuvieron aquí durante el día de ayer y al día de hoy. Muchísimas gracias por todo el apoyo y los aprendizajes. Y finalmente, el último aplauso que quiero extender es a todos ustedes por venir acá, por estar en viernes, ya si ustedes son profesoras y profesores universitarios que ya acabó el semestre, por estar aquí a las 5 de la tarde, ¿no? Entonces un aplauso también para todas y todos ustedes. Bueno, desde luego también a mi querida Pau y a Zen, que estuvieron por acá. Y si sigo diciendo se me van a olvidar, pero también gracias a Rafa, a Anaí, a las traductoras, desde luego, disculpen. Por eso no me gusta hacer este tipo de cierres, porque siempre se me pasa gente. Entonces, de verdad, muchísimas gracias a todos y a todos los que participaron.
Un aplauso para el doctor Medina también. Estamos de aplausos hoy, ¿no? Digo, son gratis, no gastan ningún tipo de nada. Pues muchísimas gracias a todas y a todos. Para la Universidad Iberoamericana es un gusto siempre abrir las puertas a colegas, educadores, educadoras, personas que nos dedicamos y sobre todo a la construcción de ciudadanía. Personas a quien nos interesa, pues justamente crecer, acompañar, dialogar con otras personas, personas que llevamos esa vocación de evolucionar, de creer, de llevar la justicia que está embebida en el acto educativo a las distintas comunidades a las que pertenecemos. Por eso este evento es gratis, porque es parte de una acción de incidencia social. Así es que muchas gracias por estar un año más con nosotros. Por supuesto que los esperamos el año que entra con otro tema de interés. Hablamos de inteligencia artificial, pero también hablamos de otras formas de hacer educación. Finalmente hablamos de otras formas de dialogar, otras formas de interrelacionarnos y otra forma de entendernos. Yo creo que si hay algo que pone en el centro la inteligencia artificial es la necesidad o la obligación de volver a conocer lo humano, de volver a saber quiénes somos como personas en lo subjetivo, pero también como comunidades en lo intersubjetivo. Entonces, bueno, llevémonos todos estos aprendizajes, pongámoslos en buen uso y nos vemos en un año para seguir dialogando. Muchas gracias a todas y a todos y a todo el equipo.
Y pues bueno, como también This is the way, como diría el Mandalorian, siempre cerramos los eventos con un brindis de honor. Entonces, les invitamos acá afuera a que puedan acompañarnos a este cierre del evento. Muchísimas gracias.
Lo intentamos. Te faltaron cosas, pero bueno.
Faltaron.